Welcome back to DSR, and I'm going over all of the Barbarian subclasses, ranking them in the system that I use that gives you not just the idea of how good I think they are, but what I think they are good at. Here's how I define those roles, and I rank by these roles, all right? So this is a very high-level description of the roles. If you're looking for more information and clarity on what each of these roles mean, I've got a video on all 8 of them, all the way from tank to support. I still haven't done scout and face yet, but those are coming. But this is also on the Google Drive, so don't feel like you have to memorize this, and don't worry about part of it being covered by me. You can just see the whole thing on the Google Drive at any time. I also have all of the rankings on the spreadsheet there on the Google Drive, as well as everything I've ranked for spells and feats and the information on backgrounds, even though I don't rank backgrounds, and all that stuff, right? So it's all there. You don't have to watch the video or rewatch the video to see the information. So here's all my rankings on all of the Barbarian subclasses so far. And today I'm going to go over the World Tree Barbarian, and you can see I don't rank this one quite as high as the others. I do think it's good. I don't think it's bad by any means, and I think it is still a lot of fun to play. And probably most importantly, this subclass is the biggest diversion from the Barbarian standard out of all of them. All the rest of them really kind of double down on what the Barbarian already is, right? More damage, more survivability, mostly that kind of theme, right? The World Tree is the first one that really diverges from that and gives you support features or more support features, mobility features, some control features, more than the other Barbarian subclasses. So let's get into the details. Path of the World Tree. Trace the roots and branches of the multiverse. Barbarians who follow the path of the World Tree connect with a cosmic tree, a Gardasil, through their rage. This tree grows among the outer planes, connecting them to each other and the material plane. These barbarians draw on the tree's magic for vitality and as a means for dimensional travel. And you notice that it says connects to the tree through their rage. And some people might be thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why does being angry connect you to this like cosmic tree thing? Remember that the rage is just a name for this thing that's really like channeling your like primal power that's connected to the nature of the multiverse, to primordial forces, to animal spirits, to tree spirits, things like that. So it's just a name, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you're angry. It can, and you can certainly play that way with any of the barbarian subclasses, but it doesn't have to. All right, and it's probably worth playing it that way, once for fun, right? To just really live that theme of being the Hulk, maybe more than once. But also take an opportunity to play it not that way sometime with a barbarian. It is a lot of fun to just play a barbarian, who isn't just this angry rage machine, but is channeling their primal power to be like the super hunter, or connecting to something bigger themselves, like a Gardasil. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It is a different way to play it. It'll be different role play opportunities. It'll give you probably more role play opportunities, right? The rage machine is very one-dimensional for role play. And so it limits your role play opportunities. Now, it's easy to role play, and if you're new to the game, it's a great way to go. And if you're new to the Barbarian, that's also a great way to go, because it is a fun fantasy to play at least once. So there's nothing wrong with playing it that way. But once you've played it that way at least once, I encourage you to try to branch out, pun intended, with a World Tree Barbarian. Branch out and try other ways to role play your Barbarian, not just this angry rage machine. Level 3, Vitality of the Tree. So your rage taps into the force of the World Tree. You gain the following benefits. Vitality Surge. When you activate your rage, you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to your Barbarian level. So it starts out at just 3. When you rage, you get 3 temporary hit points, which is underwhelming, but it scales so well that it becomes better, which is interesting. Then you have Life-Giving Force. At the start of each of your turns while your rage is active, you can choose another creature within 10 feet of yourself to gain temporary hit points. To determine the number of temporary hit points, roll a number of d6s equal to your rage damage bonus and then add them together. If any of these temporary hit points remain when your rage ends, they vanish. Okay, so there's a few things here. First off, they have to be within 10 feet of you. So this isn't as good as it seems initially, right? Initially, it sounds like, wow, that is a lot of temporary hit points. We're handing them out at the beginning of every turn. No action economy required. We can do this for 10 minutes, which means if you do this every round for 10 minutes, that's 100 instances of temporary hit points. They don't stack, but that's enough time where you could give the whole party, like start your rage a minute before you open the door, give the whole party temporary hit points, then open the door, go into combat, and as the temporary hit points are consumed, give more temporary hit points every round. Now, it's only within 10 feet of yourself. So it's only the other frontliners or maybe the midline, people who are like kind of armored and not quite as squishy as like a wizard, and they're kind of standing in the middle like a healer or support characters who have to kind of stay close-ish to the action in order to keep healing and supporting you. But like your ranged attackers and blasters who are so far back and they have no reason to be close to you. In fact, they don't want to be. They want to be as far from the action as they possibly can. They're out of range for you to give them temporary hit points during combat. So that's a big limiter. Also, the number of d6s, right? So it's not as much as you think, right? At first, it's at level 3, it's 2d6, which feels pretty good, right? That's gonna be an average of about 7 temporary hit points. But it scales poorly. It scales with your rage damage bonus, which is this column here on the Barbarian, right? So it's 2 all the way to level 9. Once you hit level 9, it's 3, and then 4 at level 16. So at level 9, it's going to go to 3d6, which is 10.5, and at level 16, it's going to go to 4d6, which is 14. So it really scales poorly. Like it doesn't keep up well. And those are just the averages. Like you could roll higher, but you also roll lower. There'll be times when you roll 2 on that 2d6 and give somebody 2 temporary hit points, or maybe give them none because they already had 3 or 4 temporary hit points. And so it's going to be a waste. It's also a little bit, I think, unfortunate that they made these things just different numbers, right? So now you've got 2 different calculations that you have to remember as a barbarian. And when you're talking about only this ability, that is not hard to keep track of. But when you talk about the whole scope of everything you have going on with your character, it does get hard to keep track of everything. And having 2 separate things that are both temporary hit points that, work slightly differently. You give it to yourself when you start rage, but you can't give it to yourself again after that. But then after that, you can give it to other people, but only at the start of your turn. The activation is different, is similar, but slightly different. The numbers are different, right? You're giving yourself Barbarian level worth of temporary hit points. You're giving other people this D6 numbers. I wish they had just unified that, to be honest, and just got rid of Vitality Surge, just give you life-giving force, allow you to use it on yourself, right? So you can just put it on yourself, maybe put in a clause that says when you activate Rage and at the start of each of your turns while Rage is active, you can grant these temporary hit points, you can include yourself, and frankly, I would scale it. So probably number of D6 is equal to your Rage bonus plus, I don't know, your Constitution modifier or half your Barbarian level, probably half, one of those 2, or your Strength modifier. One of those 3 would have been easier to remember, easier to use, and it would scale better. So this would continue to feel like a valuable and worthwhile feature long term. As it is, it falls off pretty quickly, and feels. I mean, it's not going to be nothing, but it falls off, and it's just going to feel less impactful than it did at level 3. And that's all you get at level 3, which is a little bit underwhelming compared to other Barbarian subclasses. I do give this an A at level 3 for support and a B at level 3 for survivability. The survivability part being the Vitality Surge scales better and so holds on, right? Like at level 20, that's going to be 20 temporary hit points, which is more than the 14 you're giving out with life-giving force, right? So it actually scales better. Now you're only doing it once for yourself. You can only do it once for yourself when you rage. So anyway, it kind of holds on better, and so I give it a B overall. Moving on to level 6, Branches of the Tree. Whenever a creature you can see starts its turn within 30 feet of you while your rage is active, you can take a reaction to summon spectral branches of the world tree around it. The target must succeed on a strength saving throw, which is nice. The DC is a standard calculation using your strength, or be teleported to an unoccupied space within 5 feet of you, of yourself, or in the nearest unoccupied space you can see. After the target teleports, you can reduce its speed to 0 until the end of the current turn. So I emphasize that point. That's the first one I want to talk about. It says you can, all right, which means you may, and I think they obviously intended it to be used not just as a way to control enemies, but as a way to support allies, right? You can teleport your allies and then choose not to reduce their speed to 0, right? Some allies in trouble at the start of their turn, they're grappled, they're restrained, the wizards in melee, whatever. You can, at the start of their turn, using only your reaction, no action economy on their side, teleport them to you, any space within 5 feet or the nearest unoccupied space, which could be behind you, right? You're on the front line and you just put them behind you and then they can run away, get them out of trouble. Or a fellow frontliner, right? Who maybe doesn't need to move to a different location, but needs to get out of their grapple and restrain. Teleport them to you, automatically taking them out of the grapple or restrain. Don't reduce their movement speed to 0 because you don't want to cripple your ally. And then you're helping them. So it's actually a pretty good support feature. Now, it is also a really solid enemy control feature, kind of along the lines of tanking, right? It's very similar to what Sentinel does, right? They are near you, their speed is reduced to 0, takes your reaction, right? Those three things are basically the same. And the end result would be the same too. Now, the difference is, right, Sentinel uses an attack roll, Branch of the World Tree uses a strength saving throw. In some situations, attack roll is better. In some situations, the strength saving throw will be better. The nice thing about strength saving throws is that strength generally scales with the creature's size, and it is easy to tell if they're going to have a higher strength, right? This is going to depend on how the DMs play it, but DMs, you should be giving your players the information that they would reasonably have if they were actually present in that moment. You can look at somebody and generally see that they are big and strong. So they should have an idea of how strong they are. Now, maybe you don't tell them the exact strength score of the creature, but you should be able to give them you should definitely give them a relative strength size, right? Like, oh, they look stronger than you, or not as strong as you, or they're stronger than this ally, the paladin or the barbarian. They're not as strong as them, but they're stronger than the ranger who's got, a 12. I don't know. You should give them relative strength sizes, even if they're medium sized. But if they're large and bigger, there's a good chance that they have a higher strength score. The bigger their size, the bigger their strength score generally. So if you know that they're big like that, I wouldn't use this ability. Use it on the ones who are, and frankly, you wouldn't want to use it on those ones anyway. Those are the ones you engage all the way into melee with, right? So you're standing on the front line against those creatures, and then it's their ranged creatures or the mages or the priests that you're fighting who are standing back and don't look big and strong. Use it on them, teleport them next to you, get them stuck in melee combat next to you, which is where they don't want to be. And that's a great thing to do. So it is an interesting feature. It's at the start of their turn and not the end of their turn, which is also very good. So you can kind of mess up their turn before they take it. A lot of features are like the armor, right? At level 15, Guardian Armor has the feature where if they end their turn, you can drag them to you and then make an attack. This one is the start of their turn, so you actually mess up their turn before they take it. So if they're a ranged attacker, spellcaster, you pull them next to you, and now they have disadvantage on any ranged attacks, which is great. Or they might have to cast a different spell than they were planning, right? Instead of casting a spell that's going to wreck your whole party, like Fireball, now they're in the area of the Fireball, and now they need to think about casting a spell that's going to get them out of trouble, get them away from you, instead of what they were going to do. So this is a decent feature, nice control feature. I give this one a C for support. It's not saying it's a bad support feature. Remember, when I rank anything other than a base class, the ranks are additive. So a D doesn't mean it's bad at something. It means it adds a little bit of that, and C adds a little bit more of that, and B adds even more of that, right? And an A adds a good chunk of that. So this adds a C rank level of support for your character. It adds a B rank control capability. So it's good. It's also I give it a B rank as a tanking feature. So this is nice. Level 10, Battering Roots. During your turn, your reach is 10 feet greater with any melee weapon that has the heavy or versatile property as tendrils of the World Tree extend from you. When you hit with such a weapon on your turn, you can activate the push or topple mastery property in addition to a different mastery property you're using with that weapon. All right, so this has got a couple of interesting features. First up, heavy or versatile. So yes, that's all the great weapons, but also versatile weapons. And you might be thinking, why would I ever want to use this on a versatile weapon, right? Well, if you're trying to be the tank, then you want a shield and maybe a battle axe, and battle axe is versatile, so you're going to get the extra reach with a battle axe, which is nice. This would be a bit better, I think, if there was like a pull mastery option that existed, so that you have this extra reach and you could just be with your weapon attacks pulling them to you, so they're stuck next to you. But there is no pull mastery, which feels like a miss. There should have been a pull mastery. Yeah. But also keep in mind that there are two versatile weapons, the spear and trident, that are also thrown. And this attack, it says when you hit with such a weapon, it doesn't say you have to hit with a melee attack. It just has to be a melee weapon with versatile or heavy properties, which the spear and trident both qualify as such, but you can still throw them. And when you hit, you can also activate push or topple in addition to whatever those weapons have, right? So spear has sap and trident has topple. So you could have mastery with the spear. In fact, you don't even need the mastery. You can just have a spear, throw it, because it doesn't say you have to have the mastery with a weapon. It just says you activate this mastery in addition to any mastery you might be using with that weapon. So even if you're not don't have weapon mastery with a spear, you could throw it and activate topple to knock things out of the air. Because when things are flying, if they don't have hover and they fall prone, they fall out of the air and hit the ground, and they fall immediately 500 feet. So if they're, your max range with a spear is 60 feet. If you hit them at 60 feet, they're going to fall immediately 60 feet, hit the ground, land prone, and take 66 damage. Pretty cool. All right. Now you can already do that with the trident, but with the trident, you can both have the topple mastery, because trident's base weapon mastery is topple, right? Let's actually open those up so you can see them. So this one has topple, but you can also activate push on it. So maybe you want to knock somebody down at range and push them back and just keep them like there's some creature that's doesn't have an effective ranged attack. Okay, so you can just be hitting them with a trident and get like a trident with a returning magic property on it, right? Now that that's just a regular property and not a artificer specific infusion. So just get a returning trident and just be throwing that, hitting the creature that has no, like an ogre that has no effective range attack, pushing it back 10 feet and knocking it prone. So it can just never reach you or the party. And you can do that multiple times, right? If you have 2 attacks, you can hit it twice, knock it prone at least one of those times, and push it. Now, once you've knocked it prone, you're going to have disadvantage on any attack rolls against it, because unless you're adjacent, then you'll have advantage. But once you've knocked it prone, you don't necessarily want to hit it again. So maybe you do it to 2 creatures, like hit 2 of them and push them back, knock them prone, right? It's actually a pretty good control effect. Yeah, so this is a good control effect and a good, I'm going to give it a self-buff effect, because the other thing that's going to be really important for you, that's really good for barbarians in general, is to be able to use the cleave mastery. So, and one of the most important things, or some of the most important things to help with cleaving, or the most important thing to achieve, is that you need creatures next to each other so that you can cleave them. And they have to be next to each other, adjacent to each other, and within your reach in order to activate cleave, right? You don't get to move or take another action in between. It has to be immediate. So the most important things for achieving that is pushing and having reach, okay? So other classes or other barbarian subclasses will have to like have a reach weapon like a halberd, and would have to like combo that with like a pike, because a pike can push. So on their first attack, if there's not 2 enemies adjacent, you use pike to push them adjacent, then hit them with a halberd and cleave them, which can be done and is cool and fun. But you can do this on your own without even having to get the halberd. Just have the great axe. Your reach is already 15 now with the great axe because of this. It's a heavy weapon, and you can activate push on top of cleave and topple on top of cleave. So hit them, push them into position, then hit them again, and cleave them, and maybe topple them on that second attack. And by the way, the cleave also gets its mastery, right? The cleave attack. Now you can't take the cleave off the cleave attack, but you're not replacing it anyway. You're just adding one of these. So you can also topple them on that cleave attack, or also push them on that cleave attack. So on the first attack, you push them into position next to each other. On the second attack, you hit them, topple the first guy, and on the second guy, hit it with a cleave attack and push them further away because you don't want them next to you for some reason, or who knows what. You have a lot of options here, and you can achieve these combos by yourself without having to do weapon swaps or spend multiple masteries, which frees up masteries. Then you don't need a pike weapon mastery and a great axe weapon mastery and a maul weapon mastery and a halberd weapon mastery. You can just go great axe. You've got all the package that you need, which frees up some weapon masteries. Maybe you get spear and trident, and javelin. Right? Javelin doesn't activate this stuff, but it's got a longer range. And then get the bomber feat, which isn't very great, but it's good for throwing. It makes it so that your long range doesn't have disadvantage. So now you're throwing your trident without disadvantage at 60 feet, and you're throwing a javelin without disadvantage at 120 feet. So great combos here. So this is a solid self buff. I give it a B, and some solid tanking options and solid control options. So that kind of all accumulates as a B as well. Level 14, travel along the tree. When you activate your rage, and as a bonus action while your rage is active, you can teleport up to 60 feet to an unoccupied space you can see. In addition, once per rage, you can increase the range of that teleport to 150 feet. When you do so, you can also bring up to 6 willing creatures who are within 10 feet of you. Each creature teleports to an unoccupied space of your choice within 10 feet of your destination space. So this one's interesting, and unfortunately, I think they made it more complicated than it needed to be. I would have designed this differently to make it more effective, more useful, more situations, and less complicated. But all right, this is interesting. Okay, so most people only have a 60-foot bonus action or a 30-foot bonus action teleport. You're going to have a 60-foot bonus action teleport, right? And it doesn't count as spell casting because it can't, because you can't cast spells while raging. And you get to do it as part of the bonus action that you use to trigger rage, right? So remember, you've got instinctive pounce, which also gives you half of your movement speed in addition, okay? So when you rage at level 14, your movement speed's at least 40. You're going to get 50% more of that from instinctive pounce. So you've got 60 plus a 60-foot teleport. So on round 1, 120 feet. And that's without any movement speed enhancing species abilities or feats that you've taken or magic items or anything like that. That's just on your own. You're going to have 120-foot teleport, 120-foot range to be anywhere you need to be, including a teleport, right? So teleport past the chasm, run another 60 feet right up to them. They thought they were safe, but they're not, right? You teleported right up on top of that, the fortress tower where the archmage is going to blast your party, but nope, you're right there next to him all of a sudden. He's like, what? Yeah, you're right there. So that's actually pretty good, and it has unlimited uses. It's just while your rage is active, and at this point, you're gonna have lots and lots of rages. You're gonna be able to, what is it? Persistent rage at level 15 lets you get your rage uses back once per long rest. So you're gonna have all kinds of rage uses, which means you're gonna also be able to use this outside of combat. So if you need to get someplace that's kind of restricted, either to teleport past a portcullis or teleport past a chasm when you're outside of combat because you've got to get somewhere, you'll be able to use this. It's great. And you're probably using it anyway if you're trying to be the scout. So if you're trying to be the scout, you now are not only, are using your strength for the modifier, you're have advantage on the roll because of primal knowledge for your stealth roll, and you can teleport as needed, right? Just teleport wherever you need to be, teleport past, windows, teleport, up on top of walls, and you're just teleporting, bounce, 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 without expending any spell slots or anything like that. All I've done is one rage, but you're going to use it for 10 minutes anyway. You're a pretty good scout with this ability. In addition, you've got this group teleport you can do once per rage. And this one starts off sounding really cool, but if you look at the restrictions, it really comes down, all right? So the biggest restriction is that they have to be within 10 feet of you, and they have to end within 10 feet of you. Okay. And that brings this way down. It makes it far less interesting in combat because how often is everybody going to want to teleport? First of all, how often in combat do you need to teleport 150 feet? Second, how often does everyone in the combat want to teleport with you 150 feet? And third, how often are they going to want to be within 10 feet of you to do that, right? So yes, there'll be scenarios where at the start of combat, your whole party is stuck far away from the enemy and they've got range attacks and they're blasting you, or they're on the other side of the chasm. The whole party needs to traverse that. And in those scenarios, this is going to feel awesome. But most of the time, you don't need that kind of mobility for the whole party in combat. And even if it would be beneficial, a lot of the times, the rest of the party, like all of your backliners, don't want to be that close to you to start with and don't want to be that close to you after you teleport either, right? That puts them in a vulnerable place because if the enemies take turns between the barbarian and them, that gives them the enemies the opportunity to run up to those backliners. Now those backliners are stuck in melee before they can take their turn to get away. So that 10 feet restriction really brings it down more than you would think. It really reduces the number of scenarios in which this is going to be useful and effective by a significant percentage. I can't put a specific percentage on it because it really depends on the adventure and the DM and the battle maps and things like that, right? But it's going to reduce the percentage in which you would use this or in which this would be interesting and effective by a significant amount. Which is unfortunate because this is your capstone. This is the only thing you get at level 14. What I would have done is just said, when you activate your rage and as a bonus action while your rage is active, you can do the teleport. That part's fine. The second part, I would have said once per rage, as part of your rage, or as a bonus action, as part of the action to activate rage, or as a bonus action while raging once per rage, you can make the effect of the scatter spell occur, right? You don't cast the spell, so you can still use it while raging. It's just the effect occurs. And that allows you to reposition a bunch of people on the battlefield. They don't have to be within 10 feet of you. They don't have to end up within 10 feet of you. And you can also cause enemies to make a saving throw, or they get scattered as well and get teleported. That would have made this a lot more interesting. Still would have been very thematic, and would have made it more useful more often. Yeah, that's a 6th level spell, and you get to do it once per rage. But great, it's not like an OP spell. It's a good spell. It's a useful spell, and once per rage, once per 10 minutes. I mean, you could just burn extra rages, I guess, and do it again. And you're repositioning the battlefield. Great. It's not causing any damage. That would have been a lot easier to use, I think. It would have been less effort to parse out the specifics and see what the gotchas are and then think about how does that work differently. Whereas a scatter spell, people are already, somewhat familiar with that, or many people are already somewhat familiar with that. It would have been less overhead on all of us for the game. Anyway, it is what it is. So I give this I don't rank it as high. I mean, it is so you can see it here. This is the spreadsheet. You can get access to this in the Google Drive that's linked in the description. You can see that I give it an A for mobility for yourself is an A feature. It's a C as a support feature um, because of those restrictions I talked about. And the World Tree Barbarian ends up as I give it a B overall. Now, this isn't like a disappointing B. I think it's a solid B. Maybe it's like a B plus, right on the edge. If I used pluses and minuses, this would be probably a B plus relative to all the other Barbarian subclasses, which are all A's. They're all very strong, and having everything this close to each other is good. I do wish the World Tree was a little better. I do wish that the temporary hit points of the vitality of the tree scaled a little better so that it lasted longer, feeling worthwhile for the party. But yeah, they're a B overall. And like I said, they're the most differentiated of all the barbarian subclasses. They have different features that do different things in the party, allow you to perform in different roles than what the other barbarians do, which are just doubling down on damage and survivability for the most part. That's all I got for this one. Thanks for watching. Remember to be cool with your friends when you play D&D, or these people could become your friends. And this is a game, so the point is to have fun, right? Make sure you're contributing to the fun and not detracting from the fun by being cool, okay? And especially, be cool to DM, right? Because the number one cause of not enough DM in your D&D in your life is not having a DM, right? So if you treat the DM badly and they don't want to DM anymore because they burn out, really, most DM burnout is caused by players being difficult. Then you don't have D&D. Okay, so be cool. And yeah, thanks for watching. Catch you next time.